The Final Four Prologue. Saturday, March 31st, 7:13 p.m., the Louisiana Superdome. Just because the game clock has stopped, don't believe for a single second that the hearts of the 10 basketball players on the court have quit pounding. It's not possible. That same intense rhythm beats inside the chests of the players and coaches on the sidelines for the Michigan State Spartans and the Trojans of Troy University. Only 6.9 seconds remain in regulation time, with underdog Troy leading 64-62. The Spartans' 18-year-old freshman point guard sensation Malcolm McBride glares into the eyes of his defender, Rocco Bakic, with Malcolm clad in green and Rocco in cardinal red. "Don't even think you can stop me from scoring," says Malcolm. "This is the real world we're living in, not a storybook." Then Malcolm kisses the fingers on his left hand before touching them to the tattooed portrait on his right arm. The name Tricia is arched above her carefully detailed face, indelibly inked into Malcolm's black skin. "If I don't stop you, maybe you'll trip over your big mouth," says Rocco, whose teammates call him Red Bull for his mop of curly red hair and boundless energy. Malcolm has earned a tag too, one and done. But it's not something anyone really calls him to his face. The media gave him that name during his senior year in high school, when Malcolm declared he'd enter the NBA draft as soon as he was eligible, after 1 year of college ball. As a striped-shirted referee hands the basketball to a player with the word "State" across his chest, Malcolm and Rocco begin their fight for position. Drenched in sweat, their arms and legs slide off from one another's, grappling, pushing, and pulling to the limits the refs will allow. The Spartans have only until the count of 5 to inbound the ball. And as the referee's hand slices the air for the 4th time, Malcolm finally shakes free. He receives the inbounds pass, restarting the game clock. In a millisecond, Malcolm sizes up Red Bull, who defends him tightly, denying the opportunity for a deep three-point basket to win. So Malcolm makes his move to the hoop. First, he stutter steps, disrupting Rocco's balance. Then he explodes to his right before cutting the angle sharply left. With little more than a second remaining, Malcolm stops his dribble on a dime, driving his legs into the slatted wooden floor. Then Malcolm's wiry 6'3" frame takes air. Red Bull shadows him all the way, just a fraction behind. At the height of his leap, Malcolm focuses his sight on the rim as Red Bull's outstretched hands flash across his face. Despite the strain in his muscles, Malcolm's touch is light, and he releases the rock like a feather onto a breeze. Neither Malcolm nor Red Bull sees the shot go in as their bodies tumble to the court, but they can both hear the clean swoosh of the ball through the netting before the Louisiana Superdome explodes in sound, and the clock is reset for overtime. So we have a lot of things happening here in the first few pages of Final Four. First, we're introduced to the two teams that are involved in this game. That would be the Michigan State Spartans and the Trojans of Troy University. We also know that it's at the very end of the game with only 6.9 seconds remaining, and that the Trojans lead 64-62. We're also introduced to two players here. The first one that we're introduced to is Malcolm McBride, and he plays for the Michigan State Spartans. And Malcolm's nickname is One and Done because he has publicly announced that he is going to go for the NBA after 1 year at Michigan State. Okay, he only wants to be playing college ball for 1 year, and then he's gone. And he's only there because he's forced to be there. We're also introduced to another character in this novel, and that is Rocco. And Rocco plays for the Trojans, and his nickname is Red Bull because he has red curly hair and he has like a lot of energy. And Red Bulls, are energy drinks. So these two are going against one another in these 6.9 seconds that remain. Malcolm gets the ball, he shoots, and the text doesn't come out and tell us he scores, but it is implied because it says they hear the clean swish of the ball through the netting before the Louisiana Superdome explodes in sound, and the clock is reset for overtime. So Troy gave up their 2-point lead when Malcolm scores. Okay, so at the end of regulation time, the score is 64-64, and so they're going into overtime. From the morning's national newspaper, Cinderella crashes Final Four ball. New Orleans, Louisiana. Yes, Cinderella has arrived at the big dance in the Big Easy. The Trojans of Troy University, the Cinderella story of the men's NCAA basketball tournament, will take on the heavily favored Michigan State Spartans in the first semifinal at the Final Four tonight at 5:07 p.m. The nearly 56,000 fans expected to fill the Louisiana Superdome will represent the largest crowd for which the Trojans, whose home arena seats a mere 4,000, have ever played. So this article was written like that morning before the game takes place, and it's giving us a little bit of a backstory of these two teams and some of the players. So what we learned from this is that the Trojans were never expected to make it to this game, right? They're called the Cinderella, right? Because Cinderella wasn't supposed to go to the ball, and yet here they are, and they've made it all the way to this Final Four game against Michigan State. And it also lets us know that Troy University is quite a small university, because it says their home arena seats a mere 4,000. Louisiana Superdome is 56,000. March Madness is what the NCAA tournament is called, and for good reason. Few pundits could have predicted that Troy, which had never won an NCAA tournament game before, would still be dancing in this single elimination tournament that has so far sent more than 60 teams packing over nearly 3 weeks of competition. In comparison, Michigan State, a perennial contender for the title, has been crowned national champion twice and reached the Final Four on several other occasions. So this is Troy's first time, right? This paragraph tells us that Troy has never won an NCAA tournament game before. And here they are. They've made it all the way to a Final Four game. So think if that was your school. I mean, this is a huge deal for them to have made it this far. Meanwhile, it says, Michigan State makes it quite often, so this isn't something that's as special as it is for Troy necessarily, even though, of course, this can be special no matter what if you make it to a Final Four game. Controversial freshman and soon-to-be NBA draft-bound Malcolm McBride, who made national headlines yesterday by criticizing the NCAA and stating that the players putting on this tournament should receive part of the over $700 million generated by it, is the Spartans' leading scorer and top trash talker. "This isn't even going to be a game. It's going to be more like a workout on national TV," said McBride, who hails from the tough Brewster Douglas housing projects on the east side of Detroit. "The clock's going to strike midnight early for these Cinderella Troy boys. The glass slipper doesn't fit. They're going home as pumpkins. And I'll tell them that on the court to their faces, too." Okay, so just learning a little bit more here. This book was written before NIL and before college players could make money. And so that is Malcolm McBride's main issue with this tournament and with playing for college. He wants to go pro so that he can make money. And he doesn't think that Troy should be at that tournament. We also learn a little bit more about Malcolm's backstory here, and that is that he is from Detroit, from the tough Brewster Douglas housing projects on the east side of Detroit. And we'll learn a little bit more about those later, but needless to say, it was an extremely rough neighborhood that he grew up in. Junior Rocco Bakic is the Trojans' high-energy leader. Born and raised in the war-torn and rebuilding country of Croatia along the coast of Eastern Europe, Bakic has experienced his share of intense battles as well. Bakic figures to guard McBride one-on-one most of the night. How will he respond to the brash freshman's trash-talking? So we learned that Rocco is not from the United States. He's actually from Croatia, which is in Eastern Europe. And if you know anything about that region and what happened during the 90s and so forth, it was a really rough time. There was a war. There were atrocities that happened. Of course, anytime there's a war, those occur. And so even though Rocco had a completely different upbringing than Malcolm, he still had a rough upbringing in a different way because he came from a war-torn nation that was trying to rebuild. He has freedom of speech. That's very special. It's one of the things I love most about the U.S., says Bakic. But I also find McBride to be pretty annoying. He can say whatever he wants. Now he just has to back it up on the basketball court or look very foolish. An American film and music buff, the red-headed Croatian credits his study of entertainment with helping him to better learn the English language and its accents. Even if McBride scores a big basket or two, says Bakic before slipping into his best Arnold Schwarzenegger voice from the Terminator, on defense, I'll be back. The last time the Spartans and Trojans met for stakes this high was in the Trojan War of Greek mythology, when the Spartans left a huge wooden horse outside the gates of Troy. Believing the gift to be a sign that the war was over, the Trojans brought the horse into their city. That night, the Spartan soldiers who had hidden inside the horse opened the gates of Troy so that their army could burn the city down. Earlier this week, Troy coach Alvin Kennedy showed his players Hollywood's version of the mythical war in the movie Troy. My team loved it, said Kennedy. They'll be sure not to fall for any trick plays now. They even like the fact that the Spartans won in the movie, because together as a team, we're ready to rewrite history. So it was a very famous historical reference. Well, not even historical reference, but if you ever learned about that in school, right, the Trojan War and what happened there. And so it's interesting that, it's the Spartan team versus the Trojan team for this Final Four game. In the nightcap at 7:47, the North Carolina Tar Heels and Duke Blue Devils, a pair of traditional blue bloods with 9 national championships and over 30 Final Four appearances between them, will compete for the right to take on the Troy-Michigan State winner in the championship game on Monday night. So that's letting us know what the other Final Four game is, right? It's between North Carolina and Duke. And then you see a chart here that lists the Troy University Trojan players. They're kind of like starting roster there. And so that's something you can refer back to and gives you an idea of how big these guys are and where they are from, as well as their coach, their team colors, and their mascot. Summary: surprise winners of 9 straight games. Team chemistry is a Trojan strong suit. Coach Alvin Kennedy has his players believing in themselves and not acting like tourists at the Final Four. For the Trojans to win, Rocco Red Bull Bacchick, an emerging pro prospect, must find a way to contain All-American Malcolm McBride. Undersized center Crispin Rice must stay out of foul trouble against Michigan State's enormous front court. Sweet shooting Aaron Boyce, a New Orleans native, must show the same resolve that helped him out last Hurricane Katrina in the Superdome when he faces the defensive-minded Spartans. So we also learned that one of the players, Aaron Boyce, was around for Hurricane Katrina, which was a devastating hurricane that hit Louisiana and in particular New Orleans, and a lot of people sought shelter in the Superdome there. And we'll talk more about it in class, but the conditions were not great. And so here he is back. And then we have a list of the Michigan State Spartan players. Again, you can get an idea of where they're from and how big they are. Summary: the Spartans have been here before, the Trojans have not, and succeeded under Coach Eddie Barker. If Barker can control the shot selection and attitude of freshman point guard Malcolm McBride, a sure lottery pick in June's NBA draft, the Spartans should cruise here. Grizzly Bear Cousins and Baby Bear Wilkins are no Yogi and Boo Boo and should devour rebounds against the smaller Trojans. The Michigan State bench is considerably stronger as well, even in name, boasting a junior reserve named Michael Jordan. Even Sparty, the foam rubber costume mascot, is taller and more buff than the Trojans' T-Roy. So the Trojans really, truly are the Cinderella team. The Spartan team is much bigger than them, more experienced than them, and yet they've made it all the way to this game. 7:15 p.m. on a cable sports network providing live updates from the Final Four. Announcer: welcome back to the sports news round the clock. Tonight we're truly all things Final Four. Just moments ago, Michigan State freshman Malcolm McBride, who all years declared himself to be one and done as he awaits entry into the NBA, buried a clutch shot at the buzzer, sending the first semifinal game at the Final Four into overtime. The dramatic basket kept the Spartans' hopes for another national title alive and put another inconceivable celebration by the underdog Trojans of Troy on hold. It has seemingly been all about Malcolm McBride for the past 32 hours or so. Now, in case you missed it, here are selected highlights of yesterday's question and answer session with the media and a trio of Michigan State players. Nearly all of the questions, of course, are aimed at the outspoken McBride. His lightning rod responsives has since drawn a thunderstorm of criticism from defenders of the current college basketball system and a swift counterstatement by his school. And that thunderstorm continues to reverberate tonight as he leads the Spartans into overtime in the Superdome. On screen, Malcolm McBride sits between two of his teammates, John Grizzly Bear Cousins and Dewan Baby Bear Wilkins, at a long table on a raised platform. Each player has a microphone set before him and a folded piece of cardboard displaying his name. The young men are framed with a backdrop of a blue curtain embossed with NCAA in large white lettering. Reporter: Malcolm, you've previously stated that you only chose college because of the NBA's current rule of not allowing players to enter the league until a year after their high school class graduates. As I recall, you even referred to it once as being held hostage. But now that you've spent a season at Michigan State, have you grown from the college experience? And will you be back next year, or will this truly be a one-and-done situation for you? Malcolm: I basically came here a grown man, and with all I've seen and been through, no school is going to teach me more than that. I guess a year out of the projects helped keep me alive, but my parents still live there, so my plan is to go pro as quick as I can, enter the NBA draft, and cash that fat paycheck for me and my family. Second reporter: Mr. McBride, when people hear you talk about the money, should they be turned off? I suppose what I'm really asking is, do you have any respect for the term student athlete? Or are you and other one-and-done players just using the college system to eventually line your own pockets? Malcolm, to tell you the truth, I think the system is using me to make money. I play here for free. I don't get a nickel. My parents even have to pay for their own hotel room in New Orleans. And there's always some NCAA investigator wanting to make sure that anybody looking to become my agent didn't slip them $50 for gas money to drive here. But I heard that the NCAA makes something like $700 million on this tournament, and that my school can make $15 million. I know part of that number's off my back, my sweat. That's like slavery. I could blow out my knee on any play and lose my career. Then I'd be left with nothing. Malcolm's teammates on either side of him are looking at each other now, nervously shifting around in their seats. Second reporter, you don't think that free tuition and board at a major college is worth something? Malcolm, no, it's not. That's like McDonald's giving you a free hamburger because you work there. Big deal. They had that patties, buns, and pickles ready to sell anyway. The professors in the school buildings are already there, right? What does it cost them to add one more student into the mix? Nothing. But how much money do I bring in? At least at Mickey D's, they pay you a minimum wage. Here they lean on that student-athlete stuff to stiff you, to keep you poor. They want you hungry so you'll play harder and put on a better show. They use the NBA as your kid's meal toy to get you in the front door. Third reporter, I'd like to hear something from Malcolm's teammates. John, how do you feel about competing for your school under the current system? John Grizzly Bear, tapping the microphone before he speaks, I'm proud to do it, to compete as a Spartan. I don't even go to McDonald's anymore. Not since I was a little kid. Third reporter, and Juan, what about you? Juan Baby Bear, I'm just following my dream, to play college ball at the high level and impress NBA scouts. That's all. Third reporter, so Malcolm, wouldn't everyone involved have been better off and you less abused if you'd spent the year playing professional ball overseas? You'd have gotten paid for your work there, right? Malcolm, I don't see why I should be forced to leave my own country to earn a decent living. Because I'm not 19 yet? That's age discrimination. I can vote, I can join the U.S. Army, but I can't play pro ball. Why? Because NBA owners wasted hundreds of millions on too many high school kids who couldn't cut it in the pros before? That's not me. Running his right hand back over his close-cut hair. Maybe I should go to work with my father in the auto plants for a year. Oh, that's right. I can't, because him and lots of other people got laid off from the assembly line. So that's 2 jobs I can't have. First reporter, Malcolm, just to follow up, obviously you're past your first semester of classes at Michigan State, or you wouldn't be eligible to continue playing. But there have been reports that you've stopped going to class completely during your second semester in anticipation of leaving school after the tournament concludes. If that's true, do you feel like you're manipulating the system? Malcolm, I had to take at least 6 credits my first semester, and I did. Passed them all. It doesn't matter if it was ballroom dancing or basketball 101. I passed. It's like the second time I took at the SAT and scored so much higher. Nobody believed it, and I had to take it a third time to prove I had some natural smarts. Well, I really can't remember about this semester. It's been too much basketball and travel for my school, so I'll have to wait for grades in a couple of months to find out. For the second part of that question, it's like what my father always says about living in the projects, about being trapped there. No one can manipulate the system who didn't invent it. A system that was made to keep you down. First reporter, Malcolm, there have been whispers that you may come under NCAA investigation for receiving some type of improper benefits. Do you know anything about that? Malcolm, all I can tell you is that I've got no wheels, no watch, no rings, looking down at his bare wrists and fingers, and no money in the bank. Ask anyone who knows me, anyone who sees me walking around campus. People who are jealous of me are always going to be serving up that haterade. So far as I'm concerned, those rumors come under the heading of child please. Third reporter, U.S. Secretary of Education Arne Duncan has proposed that schools which don't graduate at least 50% of their scholarship players should be banned from playing in this tournament. How do you feel about lowering your school's graduation rate by leaving early, Malcolm? What if your teammates in school pay the price for that, being banned for a future tournament? Malcolm, I don't care about none of that. I'm looking out after number 1, myself. I've seen what happens in this world when you put other people first. That's why I wear 11 on my uniform. There are 2 number 1s in a row to always remind me in case I forget. I pass the rock to my teammates when they're open. That's it. Nobody can ask any more from me, and nobody should. Broadcast cuts back to the studio announcer. Announcer, within an hour of Malcolm McBride's comments, the Michigan State Athletics Department issued this statement. Statement appears on screen as announcer reads it. We wholeheartedly believe in amateurism and the ideal of the student athlete. Our scholarship athletes abide by the rules of the NCAA and make great personal sacrifices to compete on the athletic field while maintaining their primary role as students at Michigan State. Cut back to announcer. Michigan State coach Eddie Barker, who has been battling laryngitis throughout this tournament, has yet to comment. So this is an interesting end to the prologue where we have this Q&A session with Malcolm, and we learn that he is kind of a selfish person, and it's not that he doesn't have good reasons, but when you think about playing for a team, it's a team. It's not just one person. And yet he comes out and says, I'm only here for 1 year. Then I'm gone after that. I don't care if it messes up my school and their graduation rates and their future in this tournament. I got to look out for me, number one. And in fact, he says that's why my number on my jersey is 11, because it's 2 number ones to remind myself who I should always be looking out for. And so this gives us a lot of insight into Malcolm and who he is. And it doesn't really seem like he is much of a team player at all, even though, again, it does seem like he has some good reasons as to why he's trying to get into the NBA as soon as possible.